One of the hardest things for us modern Westerners to wrap our heads around is the idea of a covenant community. Okay, I know that's a mouthful, so let me explain. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Saturday, March 15th, 2025. One of the most basic ideas governing modern Western thought is the idea of the individual as the center of meaning and value. Our whole value system is based on the sovereignty of the individual, so much so that we can barely understand how the world could be any different. From our political system, to our economic system, to our commonly held values, it is the individual who reigns supreme. But in the world of Paul's thought, the Christian community as a whole was more important than any particular individual in it. This idea colors nearly everything Paul talks about in his letters, but it really comes home to roost in today's passage. Here's the context. Apparently there was a man in the Corinthian church who had taken up an intimate relationship with his father's wife. We presume this means a woman who was not his mother, but a later wife. After all, it was quite common in those days for women to die much earlier than men, often through childbirth. In this case, we don't know if the father is even still alive or simply if the father and his wife are estranged. It almost doesn't matter. The fact is, this man is living with his father's wife, and the church, it wasn't doing anything about it. Now, in our day and age, we might consider this to be a none-of-your-business concern. What consenting adults do in their own home is their own business. It's not really our business. But Paul doesn't see it this way. As far as Paul is concerned, what each of us does matters to the whole community, at least within certain bounds. As he chides the Corinthians for not expelling this man from the church, he says, "It is actually reported that there is sexual immorality among you, and of a kind that is not found even among pagans. For a man is living with his father's wife, and you are arrogant. Should you not rather have mourned, so that he who has done this should have been removed from among you? Your boasting is not a good thing. Do you not know that a little yeast leavens the whole batch of dough? Clean out the old yeast, so that you may be a new batch, as you really are unleavened. For our paschal lamb, Christ, has been sacrificed. Therefore, let us celebrate the festival not with the old yeast, the yeast of malice and evil, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth." Notice how Paul goes from the individual case to a broader principle. This man's personal behavior is out of bounds for the Christian community. But his behavior is by no means the only behavior that Paul considers out of bounds, lest we think sin is only about sexual immorality. He goes on after this to name such things as greed, idolatry, drunkenness, and robbery. And it's not just a matter of excluding people who have committed these or other kinds of sins. After all, people can certainly repent and come clean. No, the problem is the community turning a blind eye to these things, as though they were purely private matters. Paul is convinced that countenancing such behavior has a corrupting influence on the whole church. The only way to protect the community of faith for him is to exclude people who persist in these things. But, you will ask, what about Jesus' admonition to judge not, lest we be judged? Paul's answer is that the community of faith matters, and what the community tolerates soon becomes normal or acceptable behavior. So what are we left with here? It seems to me we don't need to turn the church into a morality squad looking for sins under every rock. Part of what Paul stands for, even in this case, is a kind of spiritual modesty, an attitude that we are not somehow spiritually superior to others. That's kind of the thrust of his letter. At the same time, a community of faith does need to maintain certain standards for its members. Otherwise, what's the point of belonging to a community of faith at all? But don't worry, I'm not proposing that we suddenly adopt a new policy to seek out and root out anyone we deem to be beyond the pale. That's not the task today. Our task can be framed more positively. We need to be a community of faith that supports each other in our walk of faith. That's really what Paul is after anyway, and in that, we're not far from Paul's real concern. When we return Monday, Paul takes the Corinthians to task for engaging in lawsuits against one another. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.